Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the webinar dedicated to SCIA Engineer version 21, which has brand new user interface. And my name is Vladimir and I will be your guide in this webinar. Let's sort out just some practical things. During the webinars, you are muted, so you cannot ask directly questions, but still I encourage you all to use the questions box to ask questions during the presentation. My colleague Keith is here with me and he will be responding to these questions, and some of them I will also answer at the end of the webinar. Also, please be aware that this webinar is recorded and we are going to post it on our SCIA YouTube channel for any later view or to be able to share it with someone else. So what are going to be contents of this webinar? First, I will make some short introduction and key benefits of the new user interface of SCIA Engineer version 21. I will do the overview of the environment and its separate components, and the separate components I will actually show you in the live demo. And as I mentioned at the end, there will be a Q&A session where we will discuss topics that you are interested in. So let me start with some look into the history and how the time went with SCIA Engineer. So SCIA Engineer in forms of SCIA as a PT was released in 2006, and the user interface looked like this. Later on, and that was the first Windows distribution, basically. Later on, the SCIA Engineer was developed further into version 2020, which is the last version without the new user interface. And you can see that, of course, here the print screen is a bit nicer because the screen resolution was also bigger. But you can actually see that the environment was untouched in most of the aspects. And this is what we have prepared for version 21. So you can see that the user interface was really revolutionized and reimagined to be quite different, but the power hidden within actually remains. And in this webinar, I will show you all the aspects and tips in this new environment of SCIA Engine version 21. Let me first start with why we actually wanted to do a new interface, a new user environment. And we did that basically to tackle several of the pain points that we heard from our users and customers or learned by observing them. First pain that we actually try to overcome by the new user interface is actually the restriction in the working space. The space in the old environment was occupied by different menus, panels, toolbars, and we had to we held investigation, and actually most or approximately half of these are rarely used or not even used at all. So we did something about it in the new interface. Also, we learned that every user is different based on different domain of expertise. Tools needed by a steel user is different than what the designer for the concrete structures need. And the old UI had some customizations, but it was limited and not intuitive or nor ergonomic. So basically many people went just on with the user interface as it was without actually customizing it, but having the environment cluttered by even things that they don't need. We also learned that performing some frequent actions in some cases take a little bit more time that would be possible, and finding rarely used functions is time consuming. So I believe that you will find what we prepared for you, that we are actually tackling these two, and this will allow you to have better productivity while using SCIA Engineer, and that was our aim. Also, one of the last pain points that I want to highlight is that the old UI was often referred to be complicated, inconsistent, and of course that makes it difficult to learn. The learnability curve is not smooth. The users need a long demo or training to actually get fully efficient in the user interface. Let me now focus on some of the separate pain points. And let me start with the comparison of the working space. You can see that in the old environment that I have here, approximately 58% is used for the actual model, for the 3D scene and its components, while in the new user interface, this is increased. The increase is apparent at the first glimpse, and it's approximately by 50% from the original model size. And actually the benefit here is that seeing more of the model actually leads to less necessity of zooming, because some things are just better visible. It actually, and now I'm maybe being subjective, but it's nicer and feels certainly more modern. And also at the same time, all the features are still there and accessible as they were, yet in a maybe some adjusted way. We also make a big step in investigation and research about the actual ergonomic of use of SCIA Engineer. We did some recordings with multiple people, also amongst our user base, and we did comparison of actually performing day-to-day actions, whether those are tasks regarding modeling. Here you can see some comparison of creating the structure like this, where the users actually click, and or working with results and checks. And we observed that overall there is approximately 15% of the time saved, but also approximately the same amount of saved clicks. So I believe that in the new environment you are going to be allowed to work faster, and as we say, 15% save is 1 hour every day. So I will also show you some tips how to actually achieve that. And also we manage that by increasing the efficiency of specific workflows by approximately 2 to 8 times. And the most important ones I'm going to show you live in the SCIA Engineer. So how does the interface look like, and what are the basic components of the interface? So here, yeah, you can see that there is quite few things opened here. That's not the regular look, but I made it this way to actually show you what we have. So on the top left, there is the main menu, which hosts most of the commands and in a structured way. We also have a component called SCIA Spotlight, which is something between search bar and command bar, with some advanced capabilities like autofill of search, like you can use with Google search. This works quite in a similar mechanic. We have the status bar for some of the most important things that require often access. Then we have the properties panel. This one is very similar to what you would expect from the properties. It's very similar to what we had in the old environment, but with some advanced features that I'm going to talk about later. We have the Navicube for navigation, if navigation by mouse and hotkey is not possible. And we have also some view bar commands to quickly change the most used aspects of how the project looks like from the visual perspective. We also have the input panel, which is basically a set of toolbars that allow you to input anything that is actually an object or element in the project. And we have also a different kind of toolbar, which is called the process toolbar. The process toolbar serves a bit different purpose. It hosts most of the commands that are of a modification group or libraries, and also results and checks. And I'm going to show this to you in more depth in just in a few minutes. We also have the context menu, which works actually the same or similar way as before. Those are just some handy, most used commands that can be used anytime while right-clicking in the 3D scene. And the last but not least, we have the inbuilt tutorials. And why these are important, I will basically start with this, because this is the key how to get quite proficient in the new and familiar with the new interface when you start using it. So let me now stop the presentation for a while. Also, please be aware that in the GoToWebinar, there is a section handouts. I shared my presentation there with you, so you can download this presentation, because there are some summary slides at the end for each component that I will show you live. But if you shall ever need or want to have a look at this, this is at your disposal. Let's now have a look at the user interface of SCIA Engineer live. So I have here a project opened, and you can see that I can that looks in very similar way as in my print screens. Important aspect is the onboarding and tutorials in general. This is something that we made sure that it's as much in your face as you start the SCIA Engineer for the first time. And when you start SCIA Engineer for the first time, the onboarding tutorial will start. You can always run it again via this help menu. So let me do that just now. The onboarding is actually an inbuilt way how to learn things. And you can see that multiple things happens here. First, a predefined project is started and a set of different panels are shown. Each panel contains some description, some animation to show you what is possible. So yeah, I can actually follow the tutorial. Now it tells me that here I actually can use some filters. I will get to details later. And it also shows me that I can start actually with some basic navigation. So you can see that different objects can be anchored or docked or just moved within the environment just by dragging them and placing wherever you would like. There is also one other aspect of the components, because we really want to maximize the space, but we also know that having the properties and having the toolbars visible is important. There is one feature that I would highlight from the beginning, and that's we also support like quick minimization of the components. Just like that, you just click on them and they are either visible or not. In the past, this was linked with some performance issues, but now we really make it work in a very smooth way. So that's the proposed. Well, if that's something that you like, be sure to discover these possibilities. The onboarding goes on, and it actually asks you to in interactive way to really do things that you are asked here to do to learn the most basic features that are here. So for example, here it asks me to actually create. Okay, here I'm asked to create some columns because of course in the structure that I have here, they are missing, and I can do that. Okay, this is now blocking my view, so I just minimize it, and you can see that by actually seeing the script of the tutorial, I'm able to very quickly get along with multiple aspects. The tutorial now is continuing. There is and this one is 22 different actions or areas tackled, but I will not get into more depth here because I will show them to you live. So I will just close this tutorial and continue. Besides the tutorial, there are also the basic tutorial. There are also tutorials for steel and concrete, and we also are counting on actually extending these features as much as we will be able to provide different onboarding and different tutorials, because we also feel that that the actual onboarding in this manner is way more intuitive and easy to follow than like following 80 pages of PDF tutorial and stuff like that. So let me now get to more details because I am going to go, let's say, one by one in terms as I showed you. So here, this is the menu. Yeah, the GoToWebinar actually is blocking me here a bit, so let's move it. And the menu actually contains a lot of different commands, as you would expect from areas like file, different editing functions, tools, results and checks, setting of different view parameters, and also having a possibility to change the overall behavior or some global settings of the interface. There are also some libraries and help. I don't maybe need to go into more details here. The interesting part about the new interface that is the on-the-go customizability. What does it mean? It actually means that if there are some commands that that you like or that you want to use often, you don't have to go over to the menu to find them, because you can just take any command from here, and if I want to have it on my toolbar, I just place it here, and here it is. If I'm not happy with any of the toolbars, I just remove them. Just dragging and dropping things, and the actions are instant. Furthermore, what's possible with the menu is, of course, you can see that we propagate the hotkeys. Of course, you can use the hotkeys like Control X or Control C to move. However, you are able just to click here, hit M, and now the M is the hotkey for mirror. We actually looked at some of the leading softwares for structural engineering, and actually single letter hotkeys are something that we found pretty cool, so we built it in. So now if I just hit M, you can see that the mirror function is available right, or is launched right away, and I just hit M, right? That's very simple. Similarly to menu, we have also here the SCIA Spotlight, which is as I mentioned, the search or command line. And let me just show you how it works. Because, for example, I want to add hinged support. I don't know where it is. I just write hinge. You can first see that there is some autofill happening. So only by writing a portion of the keyword, this already gets autofilled. Now, if I would hit enter, the first one in the line would get executed. You will see that the hinged support that I looked for is here, but these commands here are actually sorted by in some order of relevance rather than alphabetically. And because we observed and we knew which commands are used the most. So for example, if I write here like 2D, you can see that the plate is going to be first, then wall, then some results, and then some other things, including the surface load. So whenever you are lost, or whenever you are actually lazy to try to find a command in the menu or elsewhere, you can just write as little as 2 letters, and there you are. If you are not familiar with some of the commands, you can quickly go to web help directly from here, or you can also use the show me function if you, for whatever reason, would like to see where such command is actually located in the menu. Let's say like divide surface. Okay, if I just click on show me in the menu, it will highlight for me this command. So yeah, I can maybe move it to the toolbar, or I can do that actually right from here. So I can move it on toolbar, and here it is. If you like this command, you can place it to your toolbar right like that. You can not only place the commands like one next to each other, but there is also possibility of stacking them. Yeah, there are some similar commands. Here, for example, I have mirror and rotate. I also think that the join and divide surface are sort of similar commands. So I can just move one on top of the other, and then I have both of them here. Of course, I can reorder them so they are maybe last in my editing functions. So all these options are possible, and the same or very similar to the menu. If I, for example, want hotkey B for beam, I just click here, write B, and B is my new hotkey. Next component that I would like to talk about is the input panel. And the input panel is available to actually do different kinds of things. In the basic view, you can see that we actually have here filter by tag, and we show something that is a set of the most used commands. So you can see that there is not many of them, but in this layout, you can actually see the most used structural objects, most used boundary conditions, but also loads or results related objects. So that's the basic modeling. Besides the basic modeling, this input panel actually follows very similar the tree behavior. So we have call it the workstations, but you can see that you can navigate from structure, going to loads, then maybe setting some dynamics and settings for calculation, and then later on going for results and check. So this actually follows the logic of the workflow of a structural engineer. So you can either see everything at the same time. For smaller projects, you might actually find that seeing just this predefined basic modeling set is just good enough, or you can enable all tags, which actually hosts many of commands. You can see that there is quite many of them. In this case, it's smart to actually go on by different workstations. So for load workstation, you can see all the commands for loads. Many of all the components contain some additional settings. You can always find them under the symbol of 3 lines, hamburger menu. And for example, I can show and hide categories if I want to really see what it is about. And also maybe to improve the learnability, I actually can also here disable the default icon mode. And by that, you actually can see that I am able to actually have the input panel in different modes. Here, I can quickly collapse some of the categories. So you can see that quickly I'm able to actually get to the exact command that I require. However, for further use, I will stick to the basic modeling and all workstation because I find it most simple. This view is very beneficial for the beginning of your work, but it takes a little bit more space, as you can see. When names are shown, of course, it takes more space. So as you go along, you can actually get in a similar mode that for example, I use here when only the icons are visible. And if more information of commands is needed, you can always find it by just waiting for 2 seconds on a command. There is also some options to change hotkeys and getting more information if there are those. So that's the input panel. And next in the line is actually the other toolbar, which is called the process toolbar. And it actually has this wheel shape with different workstation with an, let's say, graphical view. And the important thing is that you can, for example, see 2 at the same time. I think that's quite nice feature because in the old environment, you were not able to see 2 services at the same time. So for example, like having a look at results and having a look at steel. So this way I can just see still check together with basic results and use them accordingly. The primary menu is just selected by click, and the secondary menu is selected by holding your control key and clicking. There is also a hamburger menu. So there is, for example, my workstation, which is by default entirely empty, but you can fill it with whatever commands you use and to really have it personalized your way. Very important aspect, I spoke a bit about the personalization and customization. Important link with that is that all the configurations are stored right away in a specific file. And you can save this file, you can send this file to your colleague. If you customize the environment for yourself, you can just send the configuration file and he is able to use it as well. You can find it in the menu, or very simply, I just write config and you can see that there is the save and load user configuration. There is also restore whenever something gets broken and or whether you would like to restore to the factory settings. So these possibilities are here. Important aspect about the command line or the SCIA Spotlight is that as we actually are using the single letter hotkeys, like I showed you, like M for mirror, B for beam, the letters you write are not directly present in the SCIA Spotlight. So you need always to press space key to get the focus, and then you can just start writing. This also applies for some editing or inputting coordinates. You also need to press space before actually writing into the command line. Let's continue with something else, and those are the properties. So the property panel actually shows, and let me dock it like this. It shows the properties of selected objects. Important to note is that not all the properties are visible in the basic mode, because in some cases there is a lot of properties, like 30 or even 50 different lines, and we chose the most important ones to show them. Whenever you want to see all of them, you can just do that, and you can see, like, even for this beam, how many properties there are, and you can think yourself whether you maybe need those or not. If not, the lightweight mode is here. The important feature what the properties panel actually have is that you can not only see the properties of the selected objects like you would expect, but you can see also some associated data. So in this case, let me now disable the rendering and enable the actual hinges. You can see that in my project, of course, there are hinges. I just don't see them at this point, for example, but the members see them as associated objects. So even though I don't have my hinges selected, I'm able to change their parameters. So this actually makes it very, very interesting, because you don't have to select hinges or these associated objects at all if you want to change them. So the same applies, of course, for example, if I select these two nodes, you can see that right away I can change the support. And there are, let's say, endless possibilities. Everything what's attached is possible to be selected in this way. Furthermore, very important aspect that we felt actually required some extension is the possibility to be able to quickly select objects based on the same property, whatever that property is. In this case, there is no special button here, but you can just right click on the property. Let's say that I want to select all the beams in this project with the same length. So I just click on expand selection, and just like that, you can see all these are selected. I can also select a different object here, like this diagonal here. And you can now see that, of course, these objects differ in the length, so it's shown here as mixed. However, still I am able to expand selection by, well, the same parameter but with a different value. But this can be used by different manners. You can, for example, see that if I select one beam, I am able to select, for example, every beam in hole 1, but I'm also able to select every beam in hole 2. And now when I do that, I'm able to, let's say, here right-click on specific cross-section and isolate the selection only based on this cross-section. So you can see that in this way, working with the actual selection from the property window was never easier. You can actually do the same thing while right-clicking on the whole group. So you can, for example, expand selection like this to select all 502 beams in this project, or if I just click Ctrl A to just select everything, I'm also able to just right-click on beams to deselect everything else. Very similar to what I showed you in the process toolbar, that if you don't like some commands, you can just drag them to remove them. Very much applies here. I can just drag things here in a trash can. It does not delete the objects, it just removes them from the selection. So you can see that this way is also a possibility how to create specific selections for future use or for immediate use. I can show you on a simple structure where I actually don't have any results, how quickly this can be used for, let's say, editing an imported DWG structure. Because while this structure is inputted, all these beams actually share the same cross-section, all the same properties. So I can just select, for example, these three, and let's say that I expand selection on that. I also expand these and also these, and now I can place them in different layer, place them with different cross-section, and hide them from sight. I can follow the same logic with anything else. So you can see that I can actually only select like 3 members here. And you can see that I'm now unable to actually select many other by the same cross-section or layer, because they essentially have the same cross-section or layer. But just like that, I am able to select all objects that I want to place in a different layer just by actually knowing what they have in common. In this case, it was the length. Let me show you a basic workflow about results and checks, because I think that that's also very important. So for this, I'm actually going to show only part of the structure. For example, you can now actually see that also not only my beams, but all different kinds of objects are actually selected. However, that doesn't need to bother me, because if I want to hide all the panels, I just expand selection and I hide them. And you can see that now I actually have the structure as I want. On the process toolbar, there is also a way how to work with the visibility. In what I just did, I actually used the hotkeys. There are predefined hotkeys Ctrl D and Ctrl E for working with the visibility. I can also, let's say, draw invisible members. So in a faint color, you can now see the rest of the structure. But let's now work only with this part. The first thing that I would like to highlight is actually a possibility that is quite new, and that's the possibility of auto refresh. So imagine that you have this structure and you want maybe to investigate members one by one. You don't need to get stuck in lengthy calculation. So the auto refresh is great companion for that. So now you can see I can click on results. Okay, my selection is empty, but this way you can see that if my properties are well preset, I don't even need to care too much about them because the results are displayed right away. The same applies if I make a change here in the properties to maybe display results for different load case, the results automatically update as well. I already mentioned that, but there is the possibility of actually having results and check at the same time visible. So you don't need to click between different services. I just click here on a steel check. And of course, there is not too big utilization for self-weight, but you can see that the auto refresh works quite well here as well. Even if you would get stuck, let's say that I actually make the whole structure visible and I run with the auto refresh the result, you can see that it can take minutes, but I can always cancel the calculation and SCIA Engineer is going to show you whatever was calculated till that time when the calculation was stopped. Furthermore, in the status bar, there are also some other important aspects like working with scales. You can scale the deformation of the results, or you can scale the deformation of the add data, like size of a support, or you can keep it to 1. You can change the coordinate systems and the snapping. Snapping is a very important tool while modeling, but you can also change a load case, because when you are inputting load cases, it is actually very important to be able to navigate quickly and to be able to see in which load case you are actually inputting your new load impulse. And this is actually possible here by this combo box in the status bar. Last but not least, important to mention is that working with images and engineering report is actually also very simple. We have workstation reports here. The first one is report. There is a list of available reports, or I will in this case create a new one, and you can see that that behaves very similar to the old environment. Here I have a context menu, or here I have the process toolbar components, which actually can send images or tables into report. This way I can just right click here and I can send live image to report, which shall not recalculate. But it wants to actually send the most up-to-date data. And now it actually can take for this particular result multiple minutes, but I'm able to send anything into engineering report. Important aspect is, or something to highlight, is that how do you actually make the results go away? Because maybe you want to have picture without results. That's very simple. I just drag them away like I would anything else, and now I can send this image also to report, and this is no longer containing any result data. It's just a plain picture. I will not talk too much about the engineering report itself, because for that we have different webinars that were also recorded in the past, and you can find them in our YouTube channel. And the behavior of engineering report is essentially as was described in these webinars. So I think this is actually getting close to everything that I wanted to share with you. Of course, I did not do any extensive modeling here, but my intention was really to show you what we did, show you some productivity tips. Let me just summarize some of them because I think that they are important to be repeated, to be remembered. So we worked on environment, and we make sure that as much things as possible are edited on the go. So if you want to change a hotkey, you just click here. So for 3D deformation, maybe I can change it to 3. If you want to change your toolbars, that's also very simple. You just drag things there from from wherever it's possible. So that's something that you can do very, very quickly. We still have the possibility to work in services or workstations. So both the process toolbar and the input panel actually follow the logic for structural engineer, then where you start with the modeling and continue with loading, but you can get back or to different workstation at any time, or as well as in the input panel and in the process toolbar, you can have actually multiple open at the same time. I didn't mention that, but here I actually select with control, holding my control key, and multiple different services at the same time are available. For the properties panel, the most important aspect is that we are able to hide by default most of the least used attributes of every member, but we are at the same time able to see in the properties also the associated objects. Like I was able to see hinges while having beams selected. Also, the property panel features quite advanced tools to manipulate with selection, to select, deselect, or isolate selection based on different properties. And the last but not least, the status bar is a great way to have handy the most used important settings. The new one is the auto refresh, but there's also the result log or the modes for grids. And the last component that I want to just summarize is the SCIA Spotlight, with where you can just write 2 letters to get search of the relevant objects that are also sorted in a specific form so you can see on the top the thing that you are mostly like to use rather than by some alphabetical order. So this is what I wanted to show you today. I wanted to ask Keith whether there are any questions that I would like to answer.
Thanks, Valeria. So we had some fairly common questions. The first one is regarding table input and results, and when would this be available?
Indeed, that's spot on. Actually, very good question. You can see that table input and table results are not yet in this version. For most things that they are good for, there is a workaround how to achieve them, and we are actually at this very moment working on table input and results, and they should be available after summer in release 21.1.
Okay, and related to that, the following question is, in the current release, if there is something missing in the new UI, how can they use that missing feature right now, is before version 21.1?
First, let me tell you that there is not too many things missing. For 95% of there is the table input and table results that I mentioned, and that's actually the biggest thing. There are some minor things that are not yet fully plugged in, but they are really minor, and you shouldn't even notice them. But if you do, then with the installation of the new user interface, you can still use the old one. You can just find it then when you go for your start and you write SCIA, you can still see that on my computer with the installation as default, I have SCIA Engineer 21, but there is also the legacy version, the old UI, and that's the answer for that.
Okay, thank you. And another question we had is, will more tutorials be made available? This is regarding the inbuilt tutorials.
Yeah, that's a good question as well. Thank you. I think that the tutorials is actually a new concept, and we took it actually a bit from gaming industry, because there also the user is not too patient to actually go through some documentation or PDFs. So we see this as a great tool. At this point, we provide 3 tutorials, but if I'm aware correctly, more actually are in the making. Also to tackle some advanced modeling. Like you can imagine that there will be a tutorial for example, seismic calculation, where you will open your own model, and the tutorial would guide you with your model through the process what everything needs to be set, starting from, for example, load cases or all the aspects that need to be set. So more is in the making, and I hope that you are going to like them.
Yeah. I'm sure more tutorials are going to be made and implemented. The next most common question we had was, how is it possible to select by multiple properties?
Well, by the multiple properties, it's actually very similar that like with one. So you can see that if I want, for example, to select all the beams that have this length but have a different specific layer, for example, hole 1, I can do it consecutively. So I can expand selection to select everything that's in hole 1, and now I can select all that has this length. Or maybe this was in this case nicer to it the other way around. So I select everything that has the same length. You can see that my layers are mixed, but here I can isolate on layer 1. So you can see that actually I selected by multiple properties by this. And you can do that by clicking on different one. For this use, I used 2, but if you want more, that's certainly the possibility. The idea is here that if I explain it again, is I actually make quite a big selection, and that by one of the properties, and then I refined, because you can also think that they can have different cross sections, so I can then isolate based on one of the layers, and I can also isolate based on a cross section. So the logic of the selection applies to also support this exactly the same way as actually choosing single properties.
Okay, and another question is, is the new UI available in the 32-bit version?
Regrettably not. Regrettably, the new UI actually builds on the 64-bit technology. So that's one of, you can call it limitation, but it's a specific that this new development is available on 64-bit version only, because that's the answer. So there is this, let's say, limitation.
And I think that's about it. Although we have one last question, and maybe you can answer this whilst we're taking questions now. In the old UI, there was the options menu regarding where you could find the environments and the directories, for example, for templates. Where can you find this now?
Yeah, that's very, very important one. I can see why that's important. First is, let me just say, I don't need to know. I just write set or settings, and it's the first one that you find. Or yeah, I can use the show me, and it's right here under the view, and it's global UI settings. There are some settings of the rendering, directories, languages, and yeah, debugging. You won't see that, but that's the options that originally were available. So that's what was relevant for the new UI. It's here as well. There are also some interesting features like setting up the transparency. So you can see that if I don't use some of the components, they can be less or more transparent based on my choice. So that's all in the options. The options are in the dialog global UI settings. All right. Thank you for the questions. Actually, I have some questions for you too. What components from those that I shown were most interesting for you, or where you see the biggest change? So let me know, please. And with this, I am thanking you for participating, and I'm looking forward to see you in some of our other webinars. Thank you all.